I woke up at 6:15 on a Monday morning to a sound I never expected to hear outside my house. A tow truck engine. Then another, and another. I looked through my bedroom window and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Tow trucks were lined up along the private road beside my property. There were at least 6 of them, and they were removing cars. Not one or two. They were towing everything they could find. I rushed outside and saw my neighbor's pickup truck being lifted onto a tow truck. "What are you doing?" I shouted. The driver pointed toward a piece of paper attached to the windshield. HOA authorization. I immediately knew something was wrong. My property was not HOA property. The road, the parking area, and the private lot were part of land I had purchased years earlier. I walked toward the nearest tow truck. "Put that vehicle down." The driver shook his head. "Sorry, we're just following the order." Then I saw her. Karen, the HOA president, was standing beside her SUV, holding a clipboard and watching the operation like she was supervising a construction project. She looked at me and smiled. "You should have read the HOA regulations." I stared at her. "These aren't HOA vehicles. This is an HOA property." Karen shrugged. "The neighborhood has rules. This isn't your neighborhood parking lot." She smiled again. "That's not what our records say." Then she walked away. I called the tow company. The dispatcher told me they had received an authorization from the HOA claiming the vehicles were illegally parked on community property. I asked one question. "Did you verify ownership?" There was a long silence. Then the dispatcher said, "We received the paperwork from the HOA." That was enough. I went back inside and pulled out my property documents. The parcel maps, the purchase agreement, the recorded easement documents, everything. The private lot was mine. The HOA had no authority to remove vehicles from it. But by the time I returned outside, the damage was already done. One by one, the tow trucks disappeared down the road. By 9:30 that morning, 22 vehicles were gone. 22. People were furious. Neighbors were calling the HOA. Some were calling the towing company. Others were standing in the street trying to figure out where their cars had gone. Karen didn't seem worried. She told everyone the same thing. The HOA followed procedure. That sentence would come back to haunt her. I didn't argue with her. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply made a few phone calls. First, I contacted the county property office. Then I contacted the towing company. Then I contacted the company that managed the HOA's maintenance and parking operations. And finally, I called my attorney. Within a few hours, we had something important. Proof. The HOA's claim parking authority didn't cover my private property. The documents were crystal clear. But then we discovered something even more interesting. The towing company wasn't just operating a few trucks. It had a large fleet. And several of those vehicles were being stored overnight on property, controlled by an entity connected to the same HOA management operation. That became important, because the storage agreement required proper authorization. And according to the records, that authorization had never been completed. The towing company suddenly had a problem. So did the HOA. The next morning, I arrived at the towing company's storage yard with my attorney and the proper property documentation. We didn't show up looking for revenge. We showed up with records. A county representative was already reviewing the property issue. The towing company manager walked outside. He looked nervous. "What's happening?" he asked. My attorney calmly explained the situation. The company had removed 22 vehicles based on authorization that did not cover my property. Now the entire matter was being reviewed, and until ownership and authorization were properly established, the company's vehicles stored on the disputed property could not simply be moved around as if nothing had happened. The manager immediately called Karen. I could hear her yelling through the phone. Then something unexpected happened. The manager told her, "You told us you had authority." Karen insisted she did, but the documents said otherwise. Within hours, the towing operation was frozen. Their trucks couldn't simply continue operating from the disputed storage location. And that's when the neighborhood finally understood what had happened. Karen had tried to use the HOA's authority to tow 22 vehicles, but she had accidentally created a much bigger legal and financial mess. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Karen arrived angry. I arrived with the documents. The board president asked me to explain. I placed the property map on the table, then the recorded documents, then the towing authorization, then the evidence showing exactly where the vehicles had been removed from. The room went silent. One board member finally asked Karen, "Why did you authorize this?" Karen said she believed the HOA controlled the property. The board member responded, "You believed?" That one word changed the entire meeting. By the end of the night, the HOA agreed to contact every vehicle owner. The towing company was required to address the improper removals, and Karen's authority over towing decisions was suspended. But there was one more surprise. The HOA had spent months telling residents that they controlled every parking area in the development. Now they had to admit they didn't. The next morning, the 22 vehicle owners began getting their cars back. Some were angry, some were embarrassed, but everyone wanted the same thing, an explanation. And Karen finally had to give one. She admitted she had never personally reviewed the property records. She had simply assumed the HOA owned the lot. That assumption had cost everyone. The towing company lost business. The HOA faced complaints. And Karen lost the authority she had been using to intimidate residents. As for me, I installed a simple sign at the entrance to my property. Private property. Nothing more. No threats. No insults. Just the truth. Because sometimes the strongest response isn't shouting back. It's knowing exactly what you own and having the documents to prove it. If you enjoyed this HOA story, subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.